What kind of woman leaves everything behind to chase a dream into the merciless desert? Was it bravery, or was it madness? That question hung heavy over Margaret O'Brien as the Arizona sun bore down on her with the cruelty of a hammer striking iron. Her boots, bought on Boston's cobblestones, pinched and scraped with every step on the rocky trail. The desert gave nothing in return. No shade, no kindness. Only the endless shimmer of heat rising from red earth. Her carpet bag slipped in her hand, heavier with each mile. In it lay her teaching certificate, her mother's Bible, and one last change of clothes. Treasures in the city, dead weight out here. The stagecoach had already gone. Tombstone was 3 days away, and Copper Creek had laughed her out of town. Ain't no school left here, miss. The hotel keeper had spat, his teeth stained with tobacco. Children long gone. You'd do better in Tombstone. But she had no money for the fare, no horse, no companion. Just pride, desperation, and a promise whispered by her mother on her deathbed. You're stronger than you know. Go west, Maggie. Make a life. By late afternoon, her canteen was empty, her lips cracked. A mocking hawk wheeled overhead, crying into the silence. Margaret stumbled toward a mesquite bush, the poor shade little more than a taunt, and collapsed. The world swam red and black. She clutched the silver locket at her throat, whispering a prayer she barely believed. Then came the thunder of hooves. At first she thought it was a dream, some fever-born fantasy. But the pounding grew louder until a shadow fell across her hellfire. A deep voice muttered. Strong arms lifted her upright. Miss? Miss, can you hear me? Her blurred vision cleared enough to catch the outline of a man. Sun-browned face, sage-colored eyes sharp with concern, jaw rough with stubble. He pressed a canteen to her lips. Easy now, not too fast. Warm, metallic water spilled down her throat, more precious than gold. She coughed, then gasped. Thank you. Name's Jim Morrison. Big Jim, they call me. Circle M Ranch, 5 miles north. What in blazes are you doing out here alone? She fought to stand, her voice a rasp. Margaret O'Brien. I was trying. Tombstone, his brows knit 30 miles. Through country no lady should cross alone. You wouldn't have lasted another hour. I had no choice, she whispered, shame hot on her cheeks. I'm a teacher. There was supposed to be a position in Copper Creek, but the mine dried up, everybody knows. Damn shame. He studied her a moment, then without warning lifted her onto his horse like she weighed nothing. He swung up behind, one arm wrapping firmly around her waist to steady her. I can't impose. Didn't ask for payment. Rosa would skin me alive if I left you to die out here. His arm was solid, protective, and though Margaret's pride wanted to resist, exhaustion won. She leaned back against him, the smell of leather, horse, and sun on his shirt oddly comforting. They collected her bag and rode toward the North Hills. Slowly, the desert gave way to green patches, juniper, pine, and the faint glimmer of water. Margaret's heavy eyes fluttered shut as Jim murmured, Rest. It's an hour yet. When she woke again, the Circle M Ranch spread before her in the glow of sunset. A sturdy adobe house, smoke curling from chimneys, corrals alive with cattle and horses. After days of emptiness, it looked like civilization itself. Welcome to the Circle M, Jim said. Not fancy, but it'll keep you alive. A woman hurried from the house, hands on her hips, gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Dios mio, James Morrison. What have you done now? Found her near dead on the trail, Rosa, Jim explained, heat and thirst. Rosa clucked her tongue, ushering Margaret inside. In a blur, she was bathed, dressed in a borrowed gown, and tucked beneath clean sheets. The scent of herbal tea filled her senses. You're safe now, Rosa said firmly. Rest. Tomorrow we'll see what's to be done. That night, Margaret lay listening to the sounds of the ranch. Horses nickering, men calling, a guitar playing faintly. Jim appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. How's our patient? She'll live, Rosa replied tartly. No thanks to her own sense. Margaret flushed. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. You saved my life." He shrugged, uncomfortable. "Anyone would have." "No," she whispered. "They wouldn't have. I won't forget." Jim cleared his throat. "When you're stronger, maybe you could teach my hands their letters. Room and board in exchange. Can't have men signing contracts they can't read." Margaret's heart leapt at the chance. Yes, I'd like that. "Good. Rest up. Ranch life starts early." He tipped his hat and disappeared into the night. Alone again, Margaret touched her locket. The desert had nearly killed her, but it had also delivered her here, into safety, into possibility. As sleep claimed her, she saw not the Boston streets she'd left behind, but sage-green eyes and strong arms that had lifted her from the dust. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would prove she was worthy of this second chance. The rooster's crow tore through the darkness long before dawn. Margaret woke with a start, for a moment expecting the water-stained ceiling of her Boston boarding house. Instead, rough-hewn beams stretched above her, the faint scent of wood smoke and sage drifting through the open window. She sat up, realizing with a rush of clarity. She was far from the life she had known, and perhaps closer to the one she was meant to live. Rosa appeared at her door with a lamp up, "Nina. Ranch life doesn't wait for city girls." She laid a folded dress across the bed, "My daughter's." "She's married now, but these will fit you well enough." Margaret dressed quickly, surprised at the comfort of sturdy boots and a simple cotton gown. Already she felt less like a fragile outsider and more like someone who might belong. The kitchen bustled with activity. Rosa commanded it like a general, while a young man stoked the fire in the iron stove. Margaret rolled up her sleeves and joined in, slicing bacon and kneading bread with practiced ease. Rosa gave her a sideways look, then a grudging nod. "So the Boston lady knows more than books. Bueno. That will help." When the meal was ready, ranch hands filed in, rough men with sun-browned skin, some hardly older than boys. They nodded politely to Rosa, but eyed Margaret with open curiosity. She kept her chin high, serving coffee as if she had been born to it. At the far end of the table, Jim appeared freshly shaved, a clean shirt stretched across his broad shoulders. "Morning, Miss O'Brien." "Feeling better?" "Much," Margaret replied, catching the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. After breakfast, Jim stood. "Listen up, boys. This here is Miss Margaret O'Brien, proper teacher from Boston. She's agreed to hold lessons. Reading, writing, numbers, all of it. Anyone who wants to learn, show up in the barn evenings. She's our guest, so treat her with respect." A murmur rippled through the room. One sandy-haired youth, barely 19, raised his hand. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but what good's book learning out here? We got cattle, horses, and the land. Ain't that enough?" Margaret smiled kindly. "What's your name?" "Tommy Martinez, ma'am." "Well, Mr. Martinez, can you read a bill of sale? Can you write to your family? Can you figure cattle prices so no man cheats you?" Tommy flushed. "No, ma'am, but Big Jim handles all that." "And if something happened to Mr. Morrison," Margaret asked softly, "would you always depend on someone else to tell you your own worth?" Silence fell. An older hand spoke gruffly. "She's got a point. I've been cheated plenty by men with fancy papers." Jim clapped his hands. "Then it's settled. School's voluntary, but I expect you to give it a try." That evening, the first lesson began in the barn. Margaret arranged hay bales for benches and a smooth board for writing. 7 men came, nervous as schoolboys. She started with the alphabet, guiding them gently. Even Walter, a grizzled cowboy with hands like leather, beamed when he managed to scrawl his own name for the first time. As the days passed, more hands joined. The barn echoed with hesitant voices, sounding out letters, laughter when mistakes were made, and quiet pride when victories were won. Margaret's heart swelled. This was why she had come west, why she had endured the desert's cruelty. Jim often stood in the doorway during lessons, his arms crossed, sage-green eyes unreadable. He said little, but Margaret could feel his presence like a steady weight at her back. One night, when the others had left, he lingered. "You're good at this," he said simply. "They're eager," she replied, "even if they don't admit it." He lowered himself onto a hay bale, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I've been thinking. Other ranches have children too far from Tombstone to attend school. Maybe we could build something more permanent, a proper place for them." Margaret's heart leapt to schoolhouse. He nodded. Cedar Springs. Central spot. Good water. Old site's been abandoned since the Apache troubles. Could work. Her eyes shone. It would mean everything for these families. Jim smiled faintly. "Don't get too excited yet. Ranchers are stubborn. But if anyone can make it happen, maybe you can." Margaret impulsively touched his arm. "Thank you. Not just for saving my life, but for giving me a chance to build something." Jim's gaze held hers. The air between them suddenly charged. Before either could speak, voices of returning hands broke the moment. He stood abruptly, tipping his hat. "Evening, ma'am." Left alone in the barn, Margaret pressed trembling fingers to her cheeks. She had not come west, seeking entanglements. Yet she could not deny the pull she felt toward the man who had rescued her from the desert, who saw her not as a burden, but as a partner. On Sunday, ranch families gathered for a social. Children ran underfoot, wives bustled with food, and Margaret found herself at the center of eager mothers desperate for a teacher. She spoke of lessons, of hope for a school at Cedar Springs. The women's eyes shone with possibility. But as the sun dipped low, a stranger arrived. A sharp-featured man in fine clothes, far too polished for these hills. Jim's face darkened as he approached. Documents flashed in the man's hands, and heated words were exchanged. Though Margaret could not hear, she saw the stranger's sneer, the rancher's stiff postures. Finally, the man mounted and rode away, dust clouding his retreat. The laughter of moments before dimmed. Families left early, worry etched on their faces. Margaret turned to Jim when he came to her side. "Who was that?" "Silas Kane," Jim said grimly. "Represents Eastern interests. They want Cedar Springs. The water rights. Without it, none of us can survive." "And the school?" Margaret asked, dread curling in her stomach. Jim's jaw tightened. "Kane plays dirty, but we'll fight him." He looked at her then, eyes fierce and unyielding. "You didn't come here to get tangled in land wars. But you should know, Margaret, this is more than a school now. It's the future of every ranch family here." She lifted her chin, matching his intensity. "Then I'll fight too." For a moment, something softened in his gaze, something that made her heart race. "You're full of surprises, Miss O'Brien." "Margaret," she corrected softly. He repeated it, her name slow and warm on his lips. Then, with a sigh, he turned back toward the house. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Margaret remained under the starlit sky, her hand pressed to the locket at her throat. Trouble was coming. She could feel it in the restless desert wind. Yet alongside the fear grew something else, something fiercer, brighter. For the first time since leaving Boston, she no longer felt alone. The storm rolled in from the mountains without warning, turning daylight to twilight in a matter of minutes. Margaret clung to the reins as sheets of rain pelted her face. She had ridden with Jim to check the eastern water source, but now the trail had become a river of mud. "There!" Jim shouted over the thunder, pointing ahead. Through the downpour loomed a line shack, small, weathered, but solid. They burst inside, just as hail began hammering the roof like stones. Margaret stood dripping near the fireplace, her dress plastered to her skin, shivering. Jim dropped his hat and began working quickly, striking a match to the kindling left behind by other cowboys. Soon flames leapt to life, casting a golden glow across the cramped room. "You're freezing," he said, grabbing a wool blanket from a bunk. He wrapped it firmly around her shoulders, his hands lingering just long enough to warm her arms. "Thank you," she whispered, though her teeth still chattered. The fire crackled. Rain beat against the roof. Outside, the world raged. But in here, it was just the two of them, the storm shrinking the universe to one small room. Jim busied himself with coffee and biscuits left in the supply chest, but Margaret could feel his nearness with every breath. When their eyes met across the firelight, the silence grew heavy. "I used to love storms," she murmured, hugging the blanket tighter. They felt like adventure, like the world was changing right before your eyes. Jim leaned against the wall, watching her. "The day I found you in the desert, that was a storm, too. Changed my world in ways I never expected." Margaret's breath caught. The firelight danced in his sage-colored eyes, and she realized how much she wanted to hear what he wasn't quite saying. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I'm no good with fancy words, but I reckon I need to ask you plain. Do you feel what I feel when we're together?" Margaret dropped her gaze to the blanket, then lifted it again, her cheeks warm. "Yes," she said softly. He exhaled, relief mixing with something deeper. "I've wanted to tell you. I love you, Margaret. I love the way you fight for what's right, the way you never give up. I have loved you since that first day, when you stood up to Cain without flinching." Her heart thundered louder than the storm. She rose, the blanket slipping, and crossed to him. "And I love you, Jim Morrison. I love your strength, your honesty, the way you protect everyone before yourself. You saved me, yes, but more than that, you gave me a place to belong." Quote, his hands framed her face, calloused yet trembling with tenderness. Their lips met, the kiss fierce and unguarded. As if the storm outside demanded they finally surrender to what had been building between them. Margaret melted against him, the blanket forgotten, the fire's heat no match for the fire between them. When they pulled apart, breathless, Jim rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, be my partner. Not just here, not just now, always." Together, no matter what comes, tears pricked her eyes, but her voice was steady. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." The storm raged on, but Margaret felt only peace in his arms. For the first time since leaving Boston, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. 2 weeks later, the Cedar Springs schoolhouse opened, with every ranch family gathered. Children clutched new slates. Parents stood with pride in their eyes. Judge Brennan himself cut the ribbon. The school stood as a promise of knowledge, of hope, of a future that could not be stolen by men like Silas Cain. Margaret stood on the front steps, her heart swelling as the children poured inside. Jim was beside her, his hand warm in hers. "Look at what you've built," he whispered. "What we've built." She corrected. The desert wind swept across the plain, carrying laughter, hammering nails, the shuffle of chalk on slate. Life, strong and unyielding. Margaret touched her mother's locket and whispered a silent thank you, for courage, for love, for survival. As the sun dipped low, she leaned against Jim. Together they watched the school glow in the evening light, a beacon against the wild land that had nearly broken her. Now it was her home. Their home. And as Jim kissed her temple, murmuring, "Forever, angel," Margaret knew the desert had tested her and found her worthy, stronger than she ever dreamed, wilder than midnight fire.